Hello, today is the second day of Summer Dying Cloud Festival, and tonight we're gonna witness the final, the farewell show of Orange Goblin on Polish soil.
Yep.
Please introduce our guest.
I'm Ben Ward, lead singer and lyricist of Orange Goblin.
Okay, enough said. Okay, this is your last dance, and I can only imagine it must be very bittersweet feeling. But what prevails, sadness or fulfillment?
I think it's a bit of both. Obviously, when you've been doing this for 30 years, as we have, you've got some great memories, and we always said that we would call it a day when we stop enjoying it, but that's not the case. We are still enjoying it. We just feel that it's a good time to draw a line under it. We all want to move on and do other things. So there is, a lot of really good things to look back on throughout our 30-year career. But it is kind of a sad thing that we're not going to be doing this anymore. We love what we do. We still get a great buzz from it, and we really appreciate the opportunities that Orange Goblin has presented to all of us as a band. Getting to travel the world and experience different things with your best friends is something not everybody gets to do. So we're going to miss that.
Your legacy spans 30 years, 10 albums, and I could divide your history into 3 stages. But I'm more curious about your perspective.
Yeah.
Can you distinguish different stages of Orange Goblin story?
Absolutely, I know exactly what you mean. It's I think you can kind of pinpoint where we were in our career by the sound of each album that we released. And yeah, I think the definite, probably first 2 or 3 frequencies to the Big Black, we was kind of young, we was excitable, we was slightly naive, we didn't really understand the music industry or how anything worked, and we were like excited kids in a candy store being let loose in a recording studio. Didn't really sort of know what direction the music was going to take, which is why, if you listen to frequencies from Planet 10, there's all sorts of layers of keyboards and psychedelic sounds and things like that. It was just, we was having fun incorporating elements of all of our influences. And then I think by the time we got to the Big Black, we kind of decided that we didn't want to stay strictly on that stoner path. It was kind of getting a little bit diluted, the scene. You had obviously the big American bands like the Kyuss, Fu Manchu, Monster Magnet, those bands that were doing it really well. And then in Europe, there was an explosion of it as well. And you had a lot of Scandinavian bands coming out. And we just wanted to kind of differentiate ourselves from that. And we felt that being an English band, we wanted to have something that sounded resolutely English, and there's nothing more English than Motorhead. And that's what we always tried to incorporate, that cross between Black Sabbath and Motorhead. So by coup de grace, we'd kind of gone a little bit more punky, a little bit more metal, and I think that sort of progressed for a little while up until probably A Eulogy for the Damned, which was 2012, when we had sort of seen our career elevate certain levels, album sales, the touring, the fees we were being offered, that sort of thing. It escalated to a certain degree, and we kind of wanted to be a little bit more professional and polished in the studio. And I think Eulogy for the Damned was the first album that marked that. And then when you get to that stage of your career, it turns into its own thing. You stop worrying about what people are going to think of the music, and you just think, right, let's just do what we want to do. This is the whole idea of being in a band in the first place, is to make music to satisfy yourself. Or at least I think it should be. And what other people feel about it is by the by. If they like it, it's a bonus. So by Eulogy for the Damned, we were just saying, like, let's take a little bit of Lynyrd Skynyrd, let's take a bit of Motorhead, let's take a bit of Black Flag and the Misfits, and then let's just throw everything into this pot with Sabbath and Motorhead at the core. And I think we've always said that by ripping off so many other bands, we created something quite unique, and it was distinctively Orange Goblin.
Okay, when you started, the stoner scene in England was barely existed. It was just you, Electric Wizard, Acrimony, maybe someone else. I know it's just a guessing game or fool's game, but don't you feel like that time wasn't on your side back then? And if you'd started 10 years later, your story would have been
Possibly,
completely different.
I don't know. I mean, at the time, as you say, nobody really called it stoner rock. It was a doom scene. It was doom metal, and you had the northern doom bands that were signed to Peaceville Records, like My Dying Bride and
rock.
Anathema. Then you had like Solstice playing true epic doom, and then the granddaddies of the scene in the UK at the time was Cathedral, and they'd gone from the really slow, sort of almost death doom of Forest of Equilibrium to the Ethereal Mirror pretty quickly, and Ethereal Mirror brought in a lot more of those 70s disco kind of influences, and you know, Lee was wearing bell bottoms and that sort of thing, and it kind of shaped the path that a lot of the bands to follow took, like Acrimony and Ourselves and Electric Wizard were then wearing flared trousers and playing 70s influenced rock that owed as much to the likes of Pentagram and Trouble and St. Vitus as it did to Cathedral and Black Sabbath. So we didn't really call it stoner rock until the American music came over that I previously mentioned, like Monster Magnet, Fu Manchu. And I remember Lee Dorian in an interview saying around the times, like, you know, they can sing about deserts and beaches and things like that. That's not, you know, relevant to us in the UK. He says, you know, we'd look out the window and it's raining and there's burnt out cars and violence in the streets and things like that. And, you know, that kind of defined that UK scene at the time. And yeah, maybe if we'd been making that music and arrived 10 years later when it had really sort of burgeoned, it would have been a different story. But I think our biggest problem was that, you know, we were English, and even in the UK, the media there didn't take English bands as seriously as they did from like America. The likes of Clutch, who are huge there now, and everyone I mentioned previously, they kind of championed more than they did for the UK artists.
Okay, and your latest album, Science Not Fiction, sounds like a synthesis of all your previous work, and it ends with the song called End of Transmission.
Yeah.
And did you already feel back then that you were at the end of your road?
I didn't consciously. It wasn't written as a kind of farewell song. The whole idea of that End of Transmission was because we was at album number 10, and the first album was obviously called Frequencies from Planet 10, and we felt that we'd done a full circle, and it was kind of like first frequency was the first thing that people heard, and then it was like the end of our transmission, like reporting back and signing off sort of thing. And that's why the lyrics to those songs are kind of looking back over the 30-year career. And it wasn't, we didn't write it and say this is going to be the final chapter, it just kind of so happened to be.
I'm sure you're reflecting on your time spent in the band. It's been most of your adult life.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And what's the best thing this band had given to you, and what has it taken away?
It's hard to condense the 30 year. I mean, I was 18, 19 when we started this band, and you know, I'll be 51 in December, so it's hard to condense all of the good things that it's given me into one simple answer. You know, as I've mentioned before, it's given me the opportunity to travel the world. I've been to places that I would have probably never ever got to see, all over, you know, the likes of Europe for a start, and then North America and Canada and Australia and Japan and Russia and all these amazing places that as a kid you just dream of going to. So to do that, it's given me a real sense of respect for other people and their cultures, and you know, the languages and everything about other countries that you kind of take for granted when you don't travel, and that's something that, you know, I'm really grateful for. It's given me an appreciation of, you know, my bandmates and how hard we've worked. You know, a lot of it is down to the fans that buy the tickets and the CDs and the merchandise and everything, but I don't think it should go unnoticed about how hard we've worked over 30 years, because we've spent so much time and effort on this band, and that's probably helps answer the next part of the question, is what we've missed. It's because we've put so much into Orange Goblin, we haven't spent anywhere near as much time as we should have with our families and seeing our children grow up and having holidays in the summer, because every year we're, you know, touring across Europe doing festivals here and there, and that's part of the reason why we decided to call it a day, is because it's to give our families a little bit of time. None of us are getting any younger, so it's just yeah, it seems like the right time.
Every long-standing band has their Spinal Tap moments, And could you point to one in Orange Goblin's history?
It would take us all night for me to sit here and list our Spinal Tap moments. There's so
Pick up
many.
the one.
I think there was a festival we played in Holland once where I'd taken some acid just before we went on stage and started to come up halfway through the set. I fell off the stage and landed on something. I'm not sure what it was. And I sort of cut my backside. And I thought someone in the crowd had stabbed me. So I've jumped back on the stage, stopped everything, and started trying to fight with the crowd and everything. Chris is throwing drumsticks and they're throwing them back at us and everything. There's all this chaos ensued. But it turns out it was just the fact that I'd sort of fallen off the stage and fallen on something that had cut me. So there's, I mean, Joe, our guitarist, he had to come home from a tour. It was a really intense tour, like 6 or 7 weeks around Europe. And he was just playing football in the car park before the show and tore all his Achilles tendon and couldn't stand up and play. So he had that night in Italy, he had to sit down and play his guitar on stage on a chair. And the next day he had to fly home and our guitar tech had to learn the whole set and finish the tour for him. There's countless stories. I mean, the thing is, you can probably testify to this, the best nights you don't remember because they normally involve a copious amount of alcohol. You're just like, what happened last night? And it's just like, there's been crazy things. I mean, if you speak to the likes of JB from Grand Magus, he'll tell you stories about the first time we took them on tour in Europe. We were sharing a bus, and every night we had like the ritual Slayer mosh pit in the back of the bus, where everybody was running down the aisle, stage diving into the pit. Bottles and glass going everywhere and things, and people doing flips off the stairs into it, and it was just crazy times. I mean, I wouldn't get away with doing that now because I'm an old man, but yeah, it was good while it lasted. And you know, obviously we kind of realised that you can't keep doing that as a band because somewhere along the line someone's going to die. And you know, I came close. I got really sort of bad with alcohol, and a few years ago decided to go sober, and it's been a great 3.5 years since I did. I've no regrets. It's like, you know, people were like, oh, you can't be in a heavy metal band and be sober. I was like, listen, I can. I've been there, I've done that, and I've probably, you know, drunk your share as well. So, you know, it's been a really, really fun 30 years, and I'm going to look back on it fondly. I think, you know, we've achieved a lot, and it's not for us to say what our legacy is. That remains to be seen, what people say about us, but I'm very proud of what we did.
Speaking about booze, you wanted to become a footballer for
Yes.
Queen's Park Rangers.
Yep.
But eventually you discovered booze, drugs and rock and roll.
Yeah.
So football fell by the wayside.
Yeah.
Have you never regretted?
I
Did you
probably-
have any, did you have any prospects of becoming a good footballer?
I probably regret it every day when you see what money they earn now. It's like, but you know, that's true. I was 15 years old. I lived in a seaside town in England, and I got the opportunity to go to London to play for Queen's Park Rangers, who at the time were in the Premier League, had some great players like Les Ferdinand and Ray Wilkins. So it was a dream come true. And during that time, I met Martin, the old bass player from Orange Goblin, and we discovered we had the same musical taste, we had the same comedy taste, and we started hanging out. And as you say, when that happens, we started going to gigs together, and then we just sort of had this idea to start a band, and football kind of became secondary, which much to our parents discussed because they wanted us to follow the football path, obviously. And it's a shame because we were both pretty good footballers. You know, I was big for my age and was good at centre half or centre forward. And when we left Queen's Park Rangers, we kind of tried out at other clubs and everything, and we actually went to Sweden and played there for a professional club in Sweden for a couple of weeks and got bored of it, didn't like it. We played for a team, and I played one game for them, scored 2 goals, so I have a 200% goal scoring record for that team, which is probably the club sort of record. But by then we was too far committed to the music, and yeah, I never really sort of thought about kicking a ball again, which is something I actually do more of now. Now that I'm 50 and the legs don't work as well, I wish I could play. But yeah, it's something that I probably should have pursued a bit more.
You also run Route One booking agency.
Yeah.
You know the music industry from both sides, really. And
Yeah.
how has it changed since COVID? When I talk to various musicians, they say about negative consequences that are still felt most strongly, but mid-tier bands. You know, these mid-level bands.
Yeah.
Which includes you, with all due respect. And did you agree with this?
Yeah, I think so, because, you know, promoters have learned, because there was a couple of years where they earned no money and the big festivals didn't earn anything. They have to be a little bit more prudent about how they book. So they need their headliners to be guaranteed ticket sellers. They can then afford to give, you know, low-paying slots to the up-and-coming artists who are just really keen to get their name on the festival poster. But as you say, the established artists that have been doing it for 20, 25 years, they haven't seen their kind of profile driven up or fees increased, because the festivals have to be careful with what they can offer and what they pay, which is understandable, you know, when you have 2 years. And I see it from both sides. As an agent, I want my artists to be paid more, because that's my job, is to support them in that way. But as an artist myself, you know, I understand. I mean, I've done everything. When I first got into the music industry, I worked for a management company looking after David Gilmour and his interests in Pink Floyd, and artists that aren't particularly in the rock and metal world. I saw that side of it. And then I was a tour manager, traveling all over Europe looking after artists. I've obviously been an artist touring with Orange Goblin, and then I joined what was then the agency group as a booking agent, worked with some amazing agents there, including Neil Warnock. That taught me a lot. And then after COVID, I set up Route One Booking, because I wanted to be more of a boutique agency that could just be really dedicated to a few clients, but give them the best possible service. Because I think a lot of the bigger agencies, they, similarly with the promoters during COVID, they didn't want to kind of waste their time on acts that weren't making them money. And I wanted to be there to pick up those artists and give them the support they needed to benefit after COVID. And I think that's what my clients like about how I run my business, is that I'm flexible on everything we do. You know, with some of the bigger agencies, there's a lot of red tape involved and everything has to be done a certain way. But with Route One Booking, I try to be as flexible as I can with, you know, advances and deposits and things like that to my clients, so they can book their flights and their logistics and just give the full service, really.
This next question might be a little bit uncomfortable for you, but didn't you feel a sense of disappointment when bands like Electric Wizard, Cathedral or Orange Goblin, who did a lot to honor the legacy of Black Sabbath in the 90s, weren't invited to Back to the Beginning show?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. I think that, you know, I understand. Again, it goes back to that question similarly to the COVID and what festivals have to do. They have to sell tickets. And I think, you know, with Black Sabbath and Ozzy, they would have sold the tickets regardless of who else was on that bill. But they may as well have just called it Ozfest, because it was similar to the sort of lineups that you had at Ozfest in the early 2000s with the likes of Pantera and Gojira and all those guys. And I'm not, you know, I don't take anything away from those guys. These are bands that have earned their place on those lineups. But I do think it would have been really nice to show an appreciation to the bands that kept the Sabbath legacy alive during the 80s and the 90s, when, you know, to be honest, not a lot of people gave a shit about Black Sabbath. They were kind of unfashionable for a while.
That's exactly
that's
the point where my question came from.
I mean, Black Sabbath are my favourite band of all time, and I get quite annoyed when I see people wearing a T-shirt saying you can only trust yourself and the first 6 Black Sabbath albums. I'm like, no, every Black Sabbath album is amazing, because every Black Sabbath album was written by Tony Iommi, and he's had, you know, a mixture of amazing singers over the years, whether it's Dio, whether it was Ian Gillan, whether it was Tony Martin. They've all done the job that was needed for that Black Sabbath album, and the riffs are still there. They're great records, and you know, to say that it was only the Ozzy years were important is rubbish. So, yeah, I think as we were going back to the Sabbath thing, I think there was that period where they were kind of unfashionable and no one really championed them, but Cathedral obviously did, and as you say, ourselves and Electric Wizard and Acrimony and one or two other bands at the time were doing that and still wearing Sabbath t-shirts and things, regardless of how uncool it made them look. So yeah, it would have been nice for Sabbath, but whether they're even aware of those bands and ourselves, I don't know. I mean, we did get invited to do Ozfest in California in 2017, and we was the only British band that weekend on the main stage. So, you know, maybe that was our sort of our payment for that.
And how did you find out about Ozzy's death, and what was your reaction?
I was back at home in the UK because I live in France now with my wife, and I'd had to travel back to the UK to get my long stay visa put in my passport. So I'd been to the French embassy, travelled home, and then that evening I was just sort of sitting scrolling on Facebook as you do, and I noticed someone had put, "I'm hoping these rumours that Ozzy has died aren't true," and that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden you just start seeing it filter through. And I just remember being sort of cold and in shock. And I think all of us knew that day was going to come. I just don't think we expected it so soon after the Villa Park event, because, you know, it was, regardless of what your thoughts about everything, it was a magical moment for Ozzy to go out the way he did. You know, he was in poor health, but I think he did brilliantly for how he coped with it. And to finish in his home of Aston at the football stadium with Tony, Geezer and Bill, it was, you know, a perfect ending for him. So for it to come so soon after that was really shocking. But I was really chuffed to see the outpouring of love that Ozzy got, and I think it's kind of fitting because, you know, him and those three guys from Birmingham, they started what we love.
And can you name your favorite non-obvious Black Sabbath song?
I think I'd have to go for something like After All from Dehumanizer, or so, because that's really, really heavy and doomy.
I love this record.
And yeah, it's, you know, there's so many that you could pick up. There's probably, you know, 3 or 4 off every album, but that one always sticks out to me. And people say, "Oh, I can't believe you like that album." I'm like, it's a fantastic record. So yeah, I'll go for that.
For example, the track,
exactly. Yeah, and I mean, Zero to Hero is one of the heaviest riffs ever written from Born Again. It's like fantastic stuff. So why people don't sort of dive deeper into the Sabbath catalogue is beyond me.
I know this isn't perhaps the best time to pursue your musical dreams, but do you have any other music-related goals ahead of you?
I don't know, it remains to be seen. I mean, I can't play an instrument. That's one thing I've never learned to do in 30 years. I'm always just been a front man, and even then I had no sort of experience with it. I was just a guy in our circle of friends that couldn't play an instrument. I said, so I'll be the singer. And you know, when we first started, we was more death metal because I didn't have the confidence to actually sing, so I'd just growl into the microphone. And then over time I kind of started to enjoy it, and people were like, "Oh, you've got a really good presence because of your size and everything," and I kind of played up to it. But there is stuff I'd like to do. You know, I've always been a big fan of people like Nick Cave and Johnny Cash and that sort of thing. So I'd like to maybe do something a little bit darker and a little bit more kind of weird. So, you know, I think I'm going to have to do something because I like to use my imagination. I like writing lyrics, and if I'm not doing it for Orange Goblin, I'll need to do it for something else. But this will give me a chance to express possibly a darker side to myself.
Okay, so thank you for everything that you've done with Orange Goblin. I wish you all the best with any of your future endeavors.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Cheers.